We mentioned also that maybe we could include the all-time goon or all-time fighter, all-time toughest player, because that role was not included in the list.
During the break, sorry to interrupt, I just made a little short list for each team in Canada.
All right.
I kind of was chuckling to myself because I'm like, man, each team had some like tough guys. And, we got to spitball them and throw them around. But I can at least think of one guy for each team that I either played against or had heard of. Well, it was the generation before me.
Why don't we do that? Because once you get into the generational stuff, again, it can get difficult. Like my dad just sent me a text saying, if you offer to vote up to Leaf fans, probably Domi would win, but Tiger Williams would get a lot of love, as the toughest guy or the guy who caused the most commotion on the ice or whatever.
Correct.
But based on Ray's career, your career, and O's career, let's just base it on players from the past 30 years.
Right.
Let's bring in Ray Ferraro, our TSN Hockey analyst, joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Ray, we decided to add an element to the all-time 7 list that TSN is unveiling this week because we think they missed out on the fighter or the tough guy. And in Toronto, we all conceded that it would be Domi. Would you fight against that argument, or would you say Ty Domi would have to represent the Maple Leafs in that argument?
Oh, I think he would be. He would be kind of a unanimous choice, almost, wouldn't he?
Yeah, and my reasoning would be Ray because he at one time was regarded with Probert as the toughest guy in the league. It's just like when I talk about a player, I'll always go to like Gretzky because it's like that's the best of all time.
Yeah, I have a different view. I think Domi should be there, but John Kordic played how long? Not enough here?
Yeah, I don't know if he hit 225 games, but Kordic was a lunatic. Hey, Wendell should be in the running. Wendell was tough as nails.
I played in junior with Kordic.
Yeah.
Like holy.
I know. That's the scary type. And Ty Domi, to me, Ty Domi was tough as nails. I think pound for pound he was tough. But when I think of guys like Kordic and Kosher and McSorley, Semenko, these guys, Domi was fighting up. He was fighting up a weight class because he physically wasn't as big, or he was half the size of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah, he was. And I don't think, was Kordic a big guy? I don't remember.
I think he was about 6'1", maybe.
Yeah, I'm looking at him now.
225, 230. He was. I remember seeing him in the gym. He's an Edmonton guy, and his son, or his brother Dan played junior against me. John Kordic was an absolute big man, a beast. He was huge.
He played longer in Toronto than I remember. He was in and out of Montreal. Look at some of his numbers. He was never an everyday guy. Partially, I'm sure, because of suspensions and maybe injuries.
Right.
But he played, in 89-90, he played in 55 games for Toronto. He had 252 penalty minutes. 55 games.
It was a different world, wasn't it?
Crazy.
It was, and that's why. I think Ty is the hands down, just because he had the longevity, played the 1,000 game, played a regular shift, all of that. But I think of, and I always say this respectfully, Hayes, we've gotten away from the word goon, and I always joke and say there was a mutant. These guys were monsters, scary human beings. And
he was a defenseman in junior.
Kordic was, John?
John was. And on the blue line, so we had, do you remember Brian Curran?
Yes. Yep.
Those were 2 of our 6 defensemen. The front of the net was like a wood chopper's ball. Nobody was going in there. And we had a 20-year-old guy, Kelly Hubbard. He had the biggest upper body I've ever seen. And I was like, look at our defense, man. They're like giants.
Yeah. It's scary. You're right. I remember Hubbard. I also remember Brian Curran. His nickname was Shackles or something like that. The way he skated, he had a very unique style. It was almost like his skating style. His legs were tied together. But he had 350 minutes one year.
In junior, you're saying? In junior?
No, in the NHL.
Okay.
He was a huge man. Bryan Curran. Huge.
Yeah, he used to do these when he'd get going, like from a dead standstill. He'd take like these really tiny little strides before he'd stride out. It's like a 6'4" guy, right? It was the funniest thing to watch.
Yeah.
Did anyone ever chirp him?
Certainly wasn't me.
No way. Hey, smooth. It's really smooth skating you got there.
You're really going today. You got to go.
Yeah. Well, okay. So Toronto and Montreal doesn't have as long of a history. Like they had John Ferguson and
Chris Nyland. Chris Nyland would be the guy for me. Like he was in that era of
right. And Larocque was there for a while, and
Larocque. George wouldn't have had enough games there, I don't think, on the 225 thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nyland was a lunatic. Knuckles would fight constantly.
When you
Vancouver,
have a nickname,
I'm going with
Gino.
No, Greg Cox.
Oh, Craig Cox.
Craig Cox.
Yeah.
He would beat the hell out of people.
If you want to fall down a rabbit hole, Google Craig Cox, Bob Probert. You remember that fight? There were 77 punches in that fight. And it's like a punch in the face contest.
It was like they had grease on their arms, though. Like they couldn't grab onto each other. It was just like bam, 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 bam. Like, Craig Cox used to wear, when he played in St. Albert, you might know this, Noodles, but he used to wear number 99.
I didn't know that, but I remember it from there.
He was as far from Wayne Gretzky as you can. I mean, they both had feet, but other than that was about it.
I love the irony numbers.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to be like Gretzky. I'm going to get in 3 fights and get kicked out, but that's how I plan on playing.
I forgot about Craig Cox because I had just written down Gino right away. But you're right. Like,
Brashear was a monster
I was just going to say, Brash was, we were talking the last 20 to 30 years. Donald Brashear. We could have, who we should have on later this week or next week is Struddy, because Struddy was a bit of a fighter in Vancouver, maybe at a second level other than those guys. But man, Brash was a absolute tough guy, and Struddy played with him, I think.
Do you remember defenseman Doug Smolik?
Yes. Yeah.
He played with us in Los Angeles one game. He says something like, would you guys stop screwing around with Brashear? He's going to get pissed off, and I'm going to have to fight him. Like, he didn't want to fight him. And, none of us were going to fight. Like, I wasn't going to fight, right?
No
Brashear was terrifying.
He was tough, man.
Yeah, very, very tough. Yeah. So there's 3 in Vancouver.
Edmonton. Okay, so what about in Edmonton?
Well, I'd written down Semenko, McSorley, and Kevin McLelland, and George Larocque.
I mean, and we know the Oilers by their skill and all that stuff, and you've got 4, what do you call them, mutants? 4 mutants you just pulled out of there.
We'll soften it and say monsters. 4 monsters. Yes.
Oh, giant guys. Like that's 4 of them right there. You'd go into Edmonton, and they were like, just think of those guys roaming around. No wonder the other guys had room to skate.
Well, 3 of them played, like, there were times where McSorley, Semenko, and McLelland were in the lineup fighting against the Calgary Flames in the playoffs.
Well, remember the how they used to come on the ice, the walkway through the benches there?
Yeah.
And McSorley and McLelland used to stand at the end of that bench. And when you'd go by on a change, like, they would be giving it to all the other tough guys. And you'd look over, and there were like these 2 giants crammed into the end of the ball. You're next. You're, like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
What about Calgary? They've got. I can't think of someone that sticks out. I mean, I guess
Craig
Tim
Berube.
Remember Tim Hunter?
Hunter, yeah. Oh, Berube, great call.
Craig Berube, and then I played with a guy, Christoph Olawa, who loved. He had 35 fights one year, like when I was playing with him, like, and he was an absolute monster, and he loved it. Like, he would circle the board and be like, guys, I'm fighting this guy tonight. And he would be in the gym, like, boxing before the game. And
Noodles, the best YouTube clip you mentioned is Craig Berube chasing Jeff Friesen.
That's when Dave Lowry flipped the puck over to get the whistle. You got to watch that. That's an unreal.
Everyone
YouTube
listening,
clip.
just Google Craig Berube chasing Jeff Friesen because he wanted to kill Jeff Friesen, and Jeff Friesen was having no part of it.
No. Who was Berube playing for then? Calgary.
Calgary, and they had a bunch of brawls, and the benches were basically empty, and there was I think
Calgary?
it was. Yeah, San Jose. No, Anaheim.
Yeah.
Anaheim.
Anaheim.
Okay, you know what? My buddy Kevin Sawyer.
Yes.
Started that. He flipped it up. Something happened. He flipped one up in the air and ran right over the goalie.
Yeah.
He didn't even attempt to go get the puck. And
I
he turned
remember
around, and here they came.
Yeah.
I forgot. Oh, man, that was wild. Berube was all over the place in that.
Well, Dave Lowry, there was to get the whistle so that Berube could get back out of the penalty box on the ice. Dave Lowry had the puck in the neutral zone and turned and shot it into the crowd so that the whistle would come out. So the whistle blew, and then on went Craig Berube, and you see him go after Jeff Friesen, and Friesen lines up about 4 feet away from him, and Berube's gloves are off before the puck is even dropped, and he's chasing him around like that. It was
so
an animal
he
scene.
didn't really care that it was Jeff Friesen. Like, he didn't have an issue with Friesen. He had an issue with anyone in an Anaheim jersey that was lined up against him.
Because there was multiple brawls, multiple line brawls. So it was like whistle after whistle. And
Noodles, I would end up, because I was no fighter, maybe you ended up like this too, but after the brawls, you were the sucker that was left.
I'm watching
Right?
it
Like,
right
guys
now.
had
It's
been kicked out, and you were still in the game. You're like, I don't want to be here.
Right. Well, and would you be looking at the other bench saying, I can't believe that guy's still in the game? Like, I'm going to have to go finish this last shift, and he's still there.
yeah,
pissed.
The most legendary, or one of the most legendary tough guys of all time, was Archie Henderson.
I don't know, Archie.
Archie was like 450 penalty minutes a year in the American League, and he still scouts for the Oilers. He's a pro scout.
Yeah.
And we had a brawl. Alfie Samuelsson knocked out Ken Barry's teeth in one game. The next game, we had a brawl and warm-up. Ken Barry chased Alfie around, and so this brawl started 40 minutes before the game. They brought a police dog on the bloody ice. And so, it's somebody like me. I'm on there. I'm trying to hide in this in case somebody gets mad and hits me or uses me to clean the ice. Anyway, they kick out a whole bunch of guys. We had like 11 guys to play the game, and they had similar 11, something like that. Archie never got kicked out. He was still in the game. And we're like, what the hell is he still doing? We didn't even care about the game. What is he still doing here?
That's great.
It is. It's just a gong show. I was just watching it too. Berube comes back on the ice, and Greg Gilbert is coaching, and he just points to Berube. Stay on. And then Jeff Friesen is trying to get away. Berube is slashing
he's laughing,
him.
Jamie. Friesen is laughing because he's like, yeah, I'm not fighting you.
Yeah.
Don't be an idiot.
Berube's like, yes, you are. It was.
Well, here's a name. Sean sent this tweet in, and I don't know if he would qualify in Calgary, but Chris Simon is a guy that should be included. He
Absolutely.
was terrifying.
Yeah.
Like,
Didn't he get a 25-game suspension somewhere?
A stomp. He
stomped
He stomped on a guy's leg in the Island, though. I think he was playing for the Islanders, though. He may not fit the criteria. I got traded for Cy in 2004. He's a fantastic player and a fantastic guy. I mean, obviously he had his suspension issues, so people are going to judge him on that. But he was
he didn't really try to deny that he blatantly stomped the guy either.
No, he stomped on a guy's leg. He stomped on somebody's leg.
Yeah.
Like it was but it's like Cy, I think, would probably be in that mix. Same with Christoph Olawa, and then the old school guys like Joel Otto was sneaky tough, and when you're looking at Calgary,
Gary Roberts was on that team. Not that he was a heavyweight necessarily, but Robs would fight anyone.
Absolutely,
for the most part.
But yeah, so that Calgary and Edmonton mix. I was having a tough time, guys. Honestly, with Winnipeg, all I can remember was Jim Kite. Am I missing somebody else in Winnipeg? Like, I know there was a crossover to Atlanta. Like, who did you guys have for monsters in Atlanta, Ray?
Matt Johnson.
Oh, the Moose, yeah.
Yeah, he was a big dude.
Well,
yes.
Domi started in Winnipeg. He might count there. I don't know if he hit that many games, but Domi.
Hey, Noodles, sorry, Brian, just to interrupt. I just went through that video. I saw it on an ESPN highlight, the Calgary-Anaheim brawl. At the end, they show the Calgary backup goalie. It's Kay Whitmore.
Yeah, he's laughing.
I wonder if Whitty's measuring pads at that point. There was no one on the bench.
There was, nobody on that. I'm trying to see who. I think there was one player on the bench, but I'm trying to, I don't know who that is.
That's embarrassing, too, if everyone else is kicked out and you're the guy sitting there.
Yeah.
Right. How are you the only guy that didn't, jump over the bench and get into a brawl? Because there was that issue with the punch up in Piastani. The one guy didn't leave the bench. Was it Turgeon or something? I don't remember who it was. But everyone else left. Yeah.
That's the one when they turned off the lights.
They turned off the lights. Canada versus Russia. Shanahan was on that team, and I think Theoren Fleury was on that team.
Imagine what the hell happened when the lights went out.
Oh, what a great idea by some Einstein.
No,
let's turn the lights off. They'll stop.
Here's an idea.
That's prison rules right there. That's flat out.
Some of the worst sucker punches of all time.
Well, I guess the only thing I could think of behind that, now the reasoning is ridiculous because they're not going to stop, but is maybe you could spark enough fear into guys thinking, what if someone just picked up a stick? I got to get out of here. You know what I mean? Think about how dangerous that would be. You're in a full-blown bench brawl and the lights are out, and you don't know who's coming, who's going, who's behind you.
Even worse, you can't even say to the guy, hey, are we okay here? Are we done?
Right.
Yeah. The guy doesn't speak English.
Right. They're yelling in Russian. You're speaking in English. And
imagine there was tape of it, someone just wheeling around 100 miles an hour, just suckering guys.
It wouldn't even surprise me. I mean, I guess they have video. It's grainy video, but they wouldn't when the lights go off. You just see every once in a while there's some arms that kind of come into focus and. Guys, it's a crazy video.
That's tough,
that
though.
That would have been terrifying.
Yeah. And if you're the if you didn't jump and somebody was outnumbered and you're the guy sitting on the bench, I'd be pissed.
Yeah, well, and I don't remember who it was. We could find it. It's out there. But it was a real problem because they were outnumbered. The other team had 18 guys out there and Canada had 17 or whatever. And it was a real... Bert Templeton, I think, was the coach who he was famous for brawls and fighting and toughness in the O, and it was wild, man. Wild.
Man, oh man. But it's interesting to look. And for Ottawa, I had Brian McGrattan.
Oh,
am I missing somebody?
Am I
missing?
Well, Chris Neal is tough as nails too.
Yeah,
man.
I like McGrattan though. McGrattan was.
Well, he was a monster. That's the the definition.
Yeah.
I have a nickname. He's in my phone as the Beast. I call him the Beast. And we had him in Calgary, and you want to talk about bigger, and I love the guy to death. He's amazing and a great guy. But
Karkner was tough too. Karkner was. He had those brawls with Colton Orr where they just knocked each other out back to back to back. It was crazy.
Yeah,
those two fighting. Yeah. Well, I think we're going to hear from people in Winnipeg who are going to have.
Well, I'm missing, I'm missing somebody in Winnipeg. I just remember Jim Kite. I'm missing somebody, obviously.
Ty Domi might be too. He's on
Ty,
two
you're
teams.
right. You're right. Ty could be.
Yeah.
But I know somebody wrote in. I miss it at Troy Mann or Mann.
I don't know.
Sean Cronin. I remember Sean Cronin.
Oh, Sean Cronin, yeah.
Jimmy Mann. Sorry, Jimmy Mann. Tough guy for Winnipeg. I'm missing
Jimmy
on that
Mann
one.
ended up going to Quebec.
Okay.
And it's funny how these guys come around, or their name has popped up here. Our first playoff series, he got into a fight with Torrey Robertson, and he bit him. And Jimmy Mann got suspended, and the headline in our paper, in the Hartford paper, says "Man bites Tory."
I love those; they're the best.
The pun on words, the play on words. Yeah,
But
I don't remember.
Now I got to go, Noodles, because of you, and I got to go watch this Anaheim Calgary thing a little more in depth.
People are sending us clips. It's. I remember it. I wasn't there, but obviously it's a famous one. And knowing.
Try to zoom in on Friesen's face when it's about to. It's incredible.
Okay, go check that out, and you can give us a YouTube review tomorrow. at 5. And we'll put more thought into this because, this is the criteria that people are really lacking and missing.
Well, no wonder the Quizmaster didn't have this group of players in, guys.
No
of
kidding.
Course.
Imagine bringing it up with him.
This is the OverDrive criteria, and if we have the Quizmaster on, we have to make him added into his criteria.
Yes, we want a fighter at the end of the bench on the all-time team. I think it should happen.
Be awesome.